Good morning, everyone who is on right now and has joined us for the WISE Coalition meeting. Great to have you here. We're certainly drawing your attention to the slides that we have running so that you can see some of the information about our meeting today. And also thanks to the many people behind the scenes who make these meetings possible. Want to just do a reminder about what WISE is. It is the Initiative for Stigma Elimination. It's a coalition of organizations and individuals building resilient and hopeful communities by promoting inclusion and support for all affected by mental health challenges. WISE implements and advances evidence-based practices for stigma reduction. One of the ways that we do that is by offering these coalition meetings 4 times a year, quarterly throughout the year. And we're very glad to have you with us here today. I also want to just do a little bit of housekeeping. Some of it's on the screens, but down at the bottom of your screens, you can do with closed captioning. It is turned on for you to be able to turn on. So if you would like to have that on, you can go down and do a live transcript at the bottom. And or it might already be on. You could turn it off if it's annoying to you or you would rather not have it on. I also would like to draw your attention that the evolving coalition agreements are referenced on the screen, and you also receive them in an email ahead. About we really respect everyone's opinions and thoughts and throughout this meeting and want to work along lines with those agreements. Another tip that might help with logistics is on the bottom or for following along, you can do, or rather at the top, speaker view, and that might be best so you can see Hetty Keith's slides as well as also seeing her as she presents or whoever's speaking at the time. And that way you won't see everybody else. So ideally, it'd be great if you could have your cameras off. We also hope to limit the chat to just questions that you might have for those at Rogers InHealth who can help you with any kind of logistical things you're having. I also want to share that if you did not know, but we will just have one speaker, Hetty Keith, this morning. Mary Kay Wagner is unable to join us. She is in our thoughts as she is recovering from an illness, and we really hope that she is doing better. Maybe she's able to listen in today and watch. We hope so. And with that, I do not think that Mark Powless is on right now. And we do, I don't know why he's not. So I think we might not be having our land acknowledgement this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our WISE Executive Committee members, Dr. Ricardo Anderson, who is going to introduce our speaker this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to let everyone be here. Good morning. Ms. Hetty Keith is a retired master teacher, hypnotist instructor, author, and speaker. She is often selected to be on the faculty of the National Guild of Hypnotists, where thousands of hypnotists from all over the world convene to add their skills. Ms. Hetty has focused on post-traumatic stress disorder, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma for the past 11 years. Hetty has studied the workings of the subconscious mind for 40 years plus and is an expert in using the subconscious mind to change your life. She has worked with veterans teaching journal writing and meditation techniques and skills to help with PTSD and trauma. Ms. Keith is the author of 3 books, Through It All, A Memoir of Love and Loss, the story of her journey through grief and loss and healing from trauma, Through It All, Trauma Recovery Journal, an African-American scientist and inventors, an accelerated learning curriculum, which teaches about the accomplishments of African-American scientists and inventors who contributed to our country and the world. Ms. Keith is the founder and CEO of the Center for Leadership of African Women's Wellness, CLAW, whose mission is to increase awareness and develop a network of services and circles of individualized support for Black African-American women affected by trauma in Milwaukee County. Give you a round of applause and a nice welcome to Ms. Hetty Keith. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen now and we're going to get started with the presentation. Okay, just want to make it bigger. There you go. Okay. So I need to move this around so. Oh, through. All right. Okay, so the title of my presentation is The Invisible Wounds of Our African Ancestors, Putting the Pieces Back Together. And this is to be taken from an education and awareness because knowledge is power. Okay. And Michelle Obama says the difference between a broken community and a thriving one is the presence of women who are valued. I want to start with my personal family history. It is Pauline, Ella, Betty, and Ellen, my foremothers, whose shoulders I stand proudly upon. And I want to start with my great-great-grandmother, Ellen Brown. Ellen Brown lived in Cleveland, North Carolina. She was the mother of Betty Brown Kerr. And Betty was the mother of Ella Carr Wilson. And my mother's name is Pauline Wilson Anderson. So I wanted to start with Ellen Brown because Ellen felt that Ellen purchased 13 acres of land in the late 1800s, but it wasn't recorded until the early 1900s. Betty was a slave until she was 6 years old when the slaves were freed. My grandmother Ella was born in 1898, and my mother, Pauline, was born in 1917. I wanted to end with my mother because she told me something that I believe was passed down from her ancestors. And I don't know the first ancestor, but one of the ancestors that actually knew or remembered about Africa, where we came from. My mother said to me one day, I don't know why or what prompted it. She said, "I will knock you to Timbuktu." And me being the inquisitive person that I am, I said, "Well, Mama, where is Timbuktu? Don't you worry about that. I'm going to knock you there." And I said, "But I just want to know where I'm going to end up at." So Timbuktu, I later found out in my early college years when I took African history classes, Timbuktu is in Mali. Right here, you can see Timbuktu. I recently did a DNA sample because of this presentation. I wanted to be able to answer some questions. And one of the results said let me back up first. When I reestablished connections with my North Carolina relatives, they told a story that we were from Mali. That's what had been passed down to them. The DNA says we were from the Gambia, right here in the heart of Senegal, this little country right here. So I believe there is some truth to that. All this whole region was originally the Malay Empire. So we'll come back to this in a minute. The history of the transatlantic slave trade. We're going to start there. These are the ships that were packed with Africans, packed so tightly, it was like being packed in a sardine can. It was just that tight. And they traveled months and months over the Atlantic Ocean to the new world in America. But these Africans were not slaves then, they were enslaved. We want to make that clear. Not slaves, they were enslaved. They were free Africans who not one of them wanted to come to the United States. Not one. Whether they were sold or they're captured, that none of them wanted to be away from their home. They all longed to be back at home. Some of them even jumped overboard when they got up on the top level, but they were chained to each other. They ate there. It was a nasty mess. Africa is the largest continent, the second largest continent, only second to Asia. This is the area where most Africans came from, the West African coast. And you'll see how it was broken up into the different countries. Here's the Gambia right here, and Mali right there, and the Niger River. And all around here. They stopped in these ports for different items, like there was gold, there was ivory, and different things. That's the reason why they stopped here and picked up Africans there. And a lot of the Africans that they picked up were young, and they had skills in growing rice and growing all kinds of different things. Now, this is a map of Africa broken down into who were the colonizers. So you see here, the green was the French, and the orange was the British. German had purple. Portuguese had a darker green, and Italians had red. I think, did I miss anybody? So all around here is the people who colonized. And when they colonized it, they broke up pieces for themselves and renamed the countries according to what they wanted to be named. But these were all the Mali Empire right in here. So keep that in mind when we move forward. And I want to talk about culinary skills that my ancestors passed down. And there were food preparation, serving, and domestic chores. And there was a divide and conquer mentality during this time. There was the field slaves and then the house slaves. The field slaves worked the cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, rice, and indigo fields from sunup to sundown. And that was usually 15-hour a day job. They went home after that and planted and tended personal gardens to subsidize the bare minimum food rations the master gave out. I've got to move this slide again. They took care of their own children. House slaves, on the other side, worked in the slave owner's house. They were cooks, butlers, washerwomen, maids, etc. They took care of master's children, including breastfeeding them. Worked all day and night, was on call 24/7. So to the field slaves, it seemed like the house slaves had it better because they was in the master's house and they, had more freedom to do things, to go places for the master, to do things for him and his family. But they were on call 24/7. So there was some things that just wasn't good either for them. Then what I want to call to your attention is that the house slaves generally were children of the master. When we talk about generational trauma, we're talking about unhealed trauma that's been passed down through generations by our foremothers and fathers through our DNA. And then we talk about collective trauma that all African Americans possess in their DNA, though we might not be aware of it. It's there. Oh, and I want to tell you about a story that I can relate to, because one day, I don't know what we were talking about, I just remember what he said. My husband said to me, "I got papers on you." And something in me flared up so much then I thought to myself, well, we're going to see what the judge has to say about them papers you got on me. And I never, at that point in my life, it was early 70s, I hadn't even seen the root story. I didn't know the story of the slaves, but I felt and related to that statement he made me feel like I would be a slave to him because he had these papers. He was talking about our marriage license, that he had these papers on me, and it brought something back. So it triggered something in me. Okay, so professions post-slavery. They were domestic maids, cooks and party servers, caterers, butlers, boarding house. They had boarding houses and hotels and restaurants. Now, my personal ancestors, my great-great-grandmother, Ellen, was a washerwoman, dated back in 1870. She, on that census, she was a washerwoman. My great-grandmother, Betty, I'm not sure what she did, but what was passed down to my grandmother did laundry, took in laundry for rich white people. And my mother was a domestic maid for a well-to-do family. My grandmother, going back to this, my grandmother, Ella, came from North Carolina with her sister and another lady to work in white rich people's houses. That's how we made it to Pennsylvania from North Carolina. So we had a history of domestic maids, cooks, and our family did catering of parties for rich white people. And even myself, I worked with them when they had to do these parties. And as a teenager, I was working with them in these parties. So those were some of the things that was passed down to us. And I want to talk about Black economics. There were Black towns. They were all 100% self-sufficient, thriving Black communities, usually founded during and immediately preceding Reconstruction. Designed to be totally self-sufficient, insulating African Americans from reliance on white economic and social institutions, as well as potential race-based violence. And these towns were Rosewood, Florida. You can see a movie called Rosewood, and it talks about the prosperity of that all-Black town. Slocum, Texas, North Brentwood, Maryland, Seneca Village, Weeksville, New York, Mount Bayou, Mississippi, Glen Arden, Maryland, and Blackton, New Mexico. Now, Rosewood was a timber industry. They produced cedar, and they were middle-class residents, and they made pencils. They were very independent and owned everything they needed to survive. Near East Texas oil field was Slocum, Texas, had stores and businesses, and had a Black massacre in 1910. And then North Brentwood, Maryland, in 1830, it had 800 residents, and they were economically sufficient. I'm gonna move this out of here, okay. And then Seneca Village, 1825, located in Manhattan, New York, had 250 residents, 70 homes, 3 churches, a schoolhouse, and eminent domain of New York State Legislature took it from them, is now Central Park. Blackton, New Mexico, an all-Black settlement, owned 15,000 acres of land, grew cotton, onions, sugar, and beets. And Weeksville, New York, Bedford Stuyvesant, founded in 1838 by James Weeks, a community of Black professionals, a safe haven for Blacks escaping slavery. Now Brooklyn, New York. Mount Bayou, Mississippi, founded in 1887 by Montgomery, grew to 8,000 residents by 1920, known as the land of promise and economic opportunity. The most fertile land in the Delta area. Founded in 1910 by, Glen Arden, Maryland. Founded in 1910 by W.R. Smith. Had 15 residents, all middle-class suburb of DC. Incorporated in 1939 and 1940 to 1951, homes were built. 210, population grew to 6,000. And now Black farmers, after slavery, only sharecropping. Nobody would sell land to Black Americans. The Scott family land was stolen. And they said, Ed Scott Jr. said, it wasn't because we were Black. It was because we were doing so well. The land was their heritage. Black farmers filed a lawsuit against the USDA, and there were 2 million settlements. The Scott family got over 7 million and bought their land back. Black farmers had lost 12 million acres of land. They were forced out through theft. Another example is Bruce's Beach. Willa and Charles Bruce purchased the property for $1,225 in 1912. Is now worth over 75 million. A beach resort in the city of Manhattan Beach, owned by and operated for African Americans, provided the African American community with opportunities unavailable at other beach areas because of racial segregation. Its success brought harassment from resentful white neighbors and the Ku Klux Klan, which tried to burn the resort down, but that failed to drive the Bruces out. In 1924, the property was seized using eminent domain, claiming the land was needed for a park. White rage and Black massacres. In New Orleans, 1866, in 1866, my great-great-grandmother, Ellen, would have known about this. Memphis, 1866. Vicksburg, 1874, where something happened that triggered white people to just go through and massacre a whole bunch of Black people. I mean, hundreds. Wilmington, 1898. Springfield, 1908. Slocum, 1910. Now, my grandmother was born in 1898, so she would have known about Wilmington. And it wasn't too far. And I'm thinking this is Wilmington, Delaware, which is not far from North Carolina, where she was living. East St. Louis, 1917. That's the year my mother was born. In Chicago, 1919, had a Black massacre. Washington, 1919. Elaine, 1919. Now, one thing that you can notice is this was all happening after the slaves were freed, after they were on their own. Here's another one, some more. Osi, 1920. Tulsa, 1921. Rosewood, 1923. Detroit, 1943. Philadelphia, 1985. And Charleston, 2015. Post-Reconstruction. Relationships divide and conquer. We have colorism and its impact on African Americans. During slavery, once the slave was abolished, Black males were used as breeders to produce more slaves. Black females were raped. Black babies born to Black women were born into slavery, perpetual slavery. Black babies born to white women were born free. A matter of color. And these are some evaluations that I took from people who attended our Sister Talk groups. We had a guest speaker, talking about colorism. She wrote a book, and she had a book of short stories that one of them talked about her experience as a little Black girl in her family. She was the darkest of the family. The rest of them were light-skinned. They made a difference towards her. People talked about how beautiful the light-skinned children were, but they never said she was beautiful. She grew up to be resentful and angry about the way she was treated as a Black person with dark skin. She went on and she noticed that how Black men treated her and how they valued the lighter skinned women. And she was angry and resentful about that. And she decided that she would never date a Black man. So she mentioned all these things at our Sisters Talk. She doesn't date Black men. These are some of the evaluations. One person says, Sheila says, I felt sad that so many African-American women have experienced some of the same things. I was surprised that so many other women were not connected to this important conversation. Another one said, it made me feel like the only women that mattered were dark-skinned women. I felt a little out of place because I'm not dark and I'm not light, and I love Black men and other cultures as well. So in our community, we have this thing about the color of our skin that runs so deeply in our community that it has to be healed. And in order for it to be healed, we have to sit down and talk together amongst ourselves and come to an understanding that we all have been traumatized in this way, as well as other ways. Sojourner Truth said in her speech in Akron at the Women's Suffrage Convention that back in the late 1800s, ain't I a woman? Sojourner was talking about how white women are treated differently. She said, these women were lifted over puddles and helped into carriages and given the best place everywhere. And ain't I a woman? Because she wasn't given that opportunity. She wasn't lifted over mud puddles or into carriages or given the best place everywhere. And ain't I a woman? The path to healing, the way I see it. Together, we have the power to heal our community. Unity, togetherness is our strength. The Center for Leadership of African Women's Wellness. Sisters Talk Healing Circle testimonials. We did one on moving from fear to faith. And this person said, I really enjoyed Sisters Talk. It was motivating, eye-opening, and a safe space to express my innermost fears. L. Bennett. So the other way is to be able to speak our truth. If we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem, and the struggle continues. Questions? Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Hetty. Sue is going to lead us in some questions that Hetty and she talked about ahead of time, and then we'll see if we have time to take some in chat as well. If you do have some follow-up questions, if you could send them to Sue Mackenzie Dix in chat directly to her. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Hetty. It's been a process getting to this today, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and I've had an opportunity to have some conversations with you about what it is that you shared. When we've talked earlier, and I knew you were going to talk about the roles during and after slavery and the impact of what that meant for your family, the women in your family, and how they were able to thrive and survive. And then I think about their real experience, and then what you've shared about the history and both the growth of economic communities and then the massacre, the constant barriers that people faced along the way after slavery. And I want to get back to these amazing women in your life. And I understand you have a story about your aunt that you can see the impact of what all this meant through one story that you wanted to share with us about your aunt. So if you wanted to do that.
Yes. My aunt was the best friend of my mother. And my aunt happens to be Italian. Her one problem was she loved my uncle, and they were married. And because she chose to love and marry an African-American man, she was ostracized from her family. She had one sister that stuck by her and talked to her. The rest of her family just denied her. And so she only had us. And she was Aunt Carm. She wasn't just a white woman, she was Aunt Carm. There for us. And we were the only family that she had, except this one sister, Aunt Josie, stuck by her. And Aunt Josie was a character that I just loved and adored. And as a little girl, I remember being at the 5 and 10 cent store, Murphy's in our town. It was called the Murphy's 5 and 10 cent store. And they had, it was like a little apartment store. You know how that was. And they had a little place where you could eat and everything, counter and stuff like that, like the W. Woolworths. And I came through there and I saw Aunt Josie from a distance. And I'm running, hollering, Aunt Josie, because I didn't want her to leave without me getting a big hug. Aunt Josie, and everybody, mostly white people, were looking at this little black girl running through, hollering out for Aunt Josie. And when they saw that Aunt Josie was this white woman, I don't know what they were thinking, but Aunt Josie was the type of person, she could care less what people thought. She embraced me with a big hug. And she was the only one that stuck with my Aunt Carm. Now, she had a brother who, on his deathbed, even refused to see her. And for me, that the way that her family treated her, and I witnessed it, that was just awful. And I still to this day have not forgiven. And they probably are dead now, but I'm still holding on to that resentment for the way that my aunt was treated. So that was one of the first things that I had saw and witnessed in my family as far as racism was concerned. A lot of the racism that I'm sure my mother and my grandmother and my foremothers had received, that wasn't passed down because they just didn't tell, and this is collective, they just didn't tell us about what they were going through. They wanted to protect us for as long as they could. So does that answer your question, Sue?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It also makes me think about, Hetty, then if you're not, if those stories, if the stories of racist experiences aren't passed down to you, and then you learn about this, what's the impact? What's the impact been on you to learn about the history and then think back on the women that have been strong forces in your life, that they held all that without sharing that with you?
Well, the impact on me has been that, wow, they endured this. They went through this. They suffered for us, because Maya Angelou talks about it in one of her poems, how we are the hope of the slave. So they endured a lot of suffering so that one day we could be free. So we're free now to do much more than they could, but we still haven't arrived where we need to be. So we still have to pick up the torch and carry that struggle. So I say the struggle still continues.
And it sounds to me, Hetty, you've outlined areas of healing. I think about them as three powers: the power of education, the power of unity, and the power of speaking one's truth so that we can get to solutions. In some ways, it feels like a shift that, women in your past held it in, and you're now creating spaces for women to let it out and to talk about it. It feels like an important shift in this notion of how we heal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because I know how detrimental it is to our health, to our bodies, to our mental health, that we hold on to things that are destroying our bodies every day. And the stress that we have in our lives, destroying our bodies, our cells, and creating disease in our bodies. Mm-hmm. So we have to learn how to let it go.
So what does that look like for you, Hetty, when you think about healing? What have you done in your own life that is about healing from racial trauma?
I wrote my memoir. I wrote my memoir about my personal trauma. And at the point when I was writing it, I didn't recognize it as trauma. I thought I had gone through post-traumatic stress at the loss of a love. But then when I started to go to book signings and get asked questions like you are about the book, I realized that I had been traumatized with some things that happened during my childhood. And so it was eye-opening. Like I said, before then, I didn't realize anything about trauma. I just knew that I had lost the love of my life at an early age, and I didn't understand why that happened, but I never let it go. And for almost 40 years, I didn't let it go until my daughter suggested that I find out what happened. And by finding out what happened, I found myself, because I had blocked out a lot of the pain that I went through from losing him. And it's called dissociative amnesia. I forgot all about the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. You're also
but let me say this. I forgot about the pain, what caused the pain, but I was always triggered by a thought from him to cry uncontrollably. The pain was there, but it was just camouflaged,
mm-hmm.
And it's, it could be triggered at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Hetty, there's so many people on this call that like me, I describe myself as that old white woman, right? But is there a role for us? I mean, the work you're doing, bringing Black women together to talk, to have that safe place, to be able to talk about their fears and their strengths and all of that, that communal gathering seems so key to healing. What can those of us who work in these systems that are often so individual and where a white professional is working with a Black client, or a Black professional is isolated because their colleagues are white. Is there a role for non-Blacks in this healing process from your perspective, and what is it?
Well, I'm sure there is. I'd like to go back to where that came from. That came from my mother and her generation, that I saw them sitting in the kitchen together, talking about their problems and their concerns and supporting one another. That's what gave me the idea to bring Black women together, like I had seen my mother do so many times. Now, community is one of the African traditions and philosophies of doing things, whereas non-Black people see it as the individual. The Africans see it as community. And so it's an African strategy or method to bring people together, to talk about things and to heal. And they even heal in rituals. They have healing rituals and things of that nature. So that's why I do it. And I found that it's very healing. And also writing about your trauma, or writing about your stress, or your whatever's going on. Writing is magical when it comes to healing and releasing trauma. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the chat here to see if there were any questions that came in before we go to our breakout groups. Allison posted the name of some of your books. I appreciate that.
One question was, does Hetty have children, and how does she talk about the history with them, especially daughters?
Yes, I have. I had 2 children. I have a daughter and I had a son. My son passed away in 2019. I talked to them about our history. I talked to them about being positive, and I share one of the legacies that my family has passed down is going to movies. We are moviegoers. We love to watch movies, and that was introduced to me as a young child. And so my children have all gone to movies, and my grandchildren like going to movies and stuff. So during this pandemic, we have really been not able to go to the movies, and now it doesn't even seem the same because it's not a lot of people in there, that you're sharing with. And so, and I've shared different movies and books and stuff with them, and that's how we like to look at the positive side of things. And so we're always looking for the good in any situation.
Hetty, one of the things that I have taken from our conversations that I knew about, but you've really caused me to think much more deeply, is the individualistic nature of the European influence and the communal influence of many people, many peoples, cultures that are non-European. And I wonder about, when we think about our approaches that we call treatment, what it would mean for us to bring that notion of community in, and what we could learn and apply to so many systems that really force individualistic approaches.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Bringing the community in means you have to sit down and listen. we have to learn to really listen and not interject or interrupt, but let the people have their time to talk. And we don't do that as a culture, as a collective culture. We just don't do that. We interrupt. I was brought up in a small town that we all were taught, Black and white, were taught not to interrupt people. If I wanted to say something to Sue, I wanted to get Sue's opinion, and she and Allison were talking, for example, I was taught to walk up close to them and wait to be recognized, and then I could ask my question to Sue. But I found out when I moved to Milwaukee, one of my friends was even, call it perturbed about me standing there waiting for her. She didn't know I was waiting for her to stop and recognize me. She thought I was eavesdropping, I guess. So, and I have noticed that I'll be sitting there, standing there talking to somebody about something important. And just before I get ready to ask my very important question, somebody just walks up and just interjects, just doesn't even ask, excuse me or anything like that, just starts talking and moves the whole conversation. And there was my chance to be heard is lost, you know. So it's taken some time, I've been here 30 some years. It's taken some time to get over that and learn and do things the way that I've been taught. But so that's one of the things about our Sisters Talk. When another sister is talking, no one else can interrupt. She has the floor and we just listen. And I think that's what's missing, the listening part. We have to listen to our clients. We have to not speak so much, but listen.
Thanks for that, Hetty.
You're welcome.
We're going to move into some group conversations. And Allison, you're going to give us some
Sure.
direction?
Before that, there were some other questions in chat and we do have time. And
Okay.
then Mark is with us and can do a land acknowledgement. Did you want to look at a couple of the questions, Sue?
Sure, but you're going to have to tell me what they are. I've been so focused on listening to Hetty.
You were listening. That's good. Yeah, it's my job to be looking at this. That was a comment. So let me, Ms. Hetty, what are your thoughts about how colorism can be addressed on a societal level?
I think Black women, particularly, that's why I chose to work with Black women. Black women have to be taught their value. They have to know that they are valuable. We have to have these conversations with Black women so that Black women can teach their children as well. And so I think that's a societal thing to do.
Thank you. How do you, jumped to me. How does one join your societal meeting? There are Africa women who live in USA and they would like to share their life experience living in Africa and the United States.
Mm-hmm. Our circles are for African, our whole organization is about African women. We're all African women, whether we were born on the continent or not. So yes, African women are accepted and encouraged and wanted to be a part of this organization. And all they have to do is contact me and or respond to one of the Eventbrite announcements or the Zoom meetings announcements. And then we have started in-person meetings as of last Saturday at the Mental Health America site on 3910 West Lisbon through the gracious offering from Mental Health of America. This has offered us this space, and we're having in-person meetings there, plus combining the online we were able to combine with our online sisters. And we have even some sisters from out of town, from out of the state, and sometimes from out of the country to join us in our sisters talks. So we will still be doing online. We're just bringing them together.
So we can put a link in the chat connection to, so that people can connect. And it sounds like there's people outside of Wisconsin on the call today that are interested. So thank you for that, Hetty. I'm glad to know there's a
You're welcome.
virtual opportunity. One last question before we go to break. This person asked, has walking in forgiveness been a factor in your overcoming?
Oh, definitely. The reality that I'm not 100% pure Black is the forgiving part. I can't love myself if I don't forgive, if I hold some resentment toward my European ancestors. Their blood runs in my veins as well. So for me to have any hate towards them would be a hate towards myself. And believe me, I love myself. And plus, I was born and raised in a predominantly Italian community, and there was good experiences in that community as well. And like I said, I didn't see a lot of the racism. Only maybe one time I experienced rather, a help wanted sign for a waitress in a nice sit-down restaurant on one of our main streets. And I went in to apply for that. And the owner said, he wanted to hire me, according to him, but he said he didn't know what his customers would say about hiring a Black girl. So he didn't hire me, but he referred me to someone who did. And I worked for this Johnny's drive-in. It was drive-in where they went out to the cars and took the orders and brought the meal to the car. And they were basically young people, young white people my age, and I went to school with and that. And so that's what transpired there. I could never forget Aunt Josie or Aunt Carm. So no, I don't hold any resentment, but I feel that there's value in knowing the history of what transpired from my ancestors and the strength and courage that they had to hold on for a better day for us from this generation and forward from them.
Thank you, Hetty.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Hetty. I also wanted to mention that tomorrow, everyone who registered will get an email that has some of the stuff in the chat as to Hetty has 3 books and also more information about Claw and the direct link to her website. I also wanted to mention that Hetty has been very involved in all of our meetings this year. She's been on the planning committee and has been really vital in making these 4 meetings a really huge success and giving us a lot of input and help. So we thank her greatly for not just today, but for over a year now, I think, Hetty, we've been at this. So yeah. I really appreciate, hope to keep that connection going with WISE with you. Mark Paulus was having some technical difficulties earlier, and he is with us now. And so before we go to breakouts, which I can describe in a minute, we are going to let Mark take the floor and do a land acknowledgement for us.
Thank you. Sagoli Swagwake. My name is Mark Paulus. I'm the general manager for the Oneida Nation here in Wisconsin. We're located just outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin. In fact, our reservation, it covers a portion of Green Bay. So we're definitely neighbors. But again, welcome to everybody today. The land acknowledgement for today, I'll be relating to trauma. Land acknowledgements are becoming more and more common in forms such as the conversation happening today. Thank you, Ms. Hetty Keith, for your presentation today. Land acknowledgements take on many forms and deliver different messages. All recognize the past, present, and future connection of Indigenous people to the land. The land we all stand on today is Indigenous land with a rich history of Indigenous culture, Indigenous foods, and Indigenous experiences. The arrival of Europeans led to the genocide and removal of Indigenous people as the European settlers' desire for land could not be satiated. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act forced the removal of Indigenous people from their lands and confined them to reservations. The US Supreme Court determined the Indian Removal Act was unconstitutional, but it did not prevent Andrew Jackson from enacting Indian removal. Some of the injustices related to fraudulently taking land from Indigenous people have been recognized, such as the recent return of 756 acres to the Pitt River tribe in California. The earth is often referred to as Mother Earth because it provides all of our sustenance. She provides all that we need to live. Tribal nations across the United States continue to protect Mother Earth and take efforts to restore Mother Earth to her natural state. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day here with the WISE Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate that. We're now going to go into our breakout groups to have a chance to discuss the two questions that are in chat. We have facilitators who will help with the breakout groups, a chance to really reflect on Hetty's message today and sort of do some further thinking about what we can do with what we've heard and what kind of action steps we can take and further reflection. So we hope that you'll stay on. We'll be in breakout groups for about 20 minutes and then come back and do some share out. There'll be a facilitator in your group to help lead you. So we'll see you back in about 20 minutes. Thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope your time was as, I don't know, just, I would describe my group. I just felt connected to some really awesome human beings, all trying to figure out how to be in this world. So I hope you had some of that experience as well. I want to give some space to facilitators to share out some of the wisdom from the conversations. And you can just unmute and go because I'm not going to know who's there. It looks like Barbara, you're ready to speak. Is that right?
No, I'm not actually. Give me a moment.
Okay.
Thanks. I don't know why.
Hi,
I'm
Sue,
unmuted.
it's Ann Homestead. I'll go for a second and then yield to Barbara. I think the ability to talk about these things without judgment in groups that do or don't look like us, just overall the stigma, you know, getting past the stigma or the judgment we may feel from people opens the door to really telling the stories that need to be told.
Thanks, Ann.
I'll go next. So I had the breakout group 4. And so the takeaways from that group were the massacres. Many of the group members expressed that they never really heard the history of that many massacres. And the last person who had the pleasure to speak, which is Claire, even mentioned some of the other things, like even considering in the Milwaukee area, how they kind of put the highway through Bronzeville. And so just those type of things that are not even listed in history that could have happened outside of just the ones that we have grown to learn about over the years. We were really into the conversation of colorism. I made a kind of a comparison with colorism even looking at the correlation between Europeans, blonde hair and brown hair individuals, and how that distinction is kind of similar to what people of color experience with the light skin, darker skin. And so a couple of the people in the space was able to identify within themselves those differences as a white person who the hierarchy of like the blonde hair, blue eye being the purest, and then those with brown eyes and brown hair. And then we had one young lady, Ida, who shared her family history about two of her grandmother's sisters who were kind of just ostracized based on the fact that they had darker skin, and just kind of how they were just kind of ruled out of the family altogether based on those kind of things. So the impact of a lot of what Hetty said, and thank you, Hetty, for that wonderful presentation. And all that information, because almost each area that you talked about can be really dissected and talked about individually as a subject matter. So thank you again, and thank you everybody for the feedback.
Thank you, Terry.
Hi, this is Martina. I had the pleasure of being with a group of providers. Everyone was a provider, and it was just kind of interesting. We didn't get to the second question, but I think it's okay. I think we really spent some time talking about healing, and I happen to be the only person of color in my group. And so it was, you could tell, I'm not sure if people were super comfortable at first, but I really appreciate the willingness to go there. And I think we did. And there were at first kind of, some surface conversation, and it just raised a question that I think was hanging in the air, like, okay, we know what's going on in our community and all the disparities. You as a non-person of color, you guys are together, what do you think needs to happen for healing? And it was lovely. It's what you would expect. Building trust, building relationships, recognizing that, you know what, I like the work that I do and I like the population that I serve, but how do they really feel about me as a white provider? And so I just appreciated the willingness to reflect. We didn't solve anything today, but folks talked about being action oriented, and like that it's really important. We're all kind of the choir. How does this conversation expand to some folks that might not have an opportunity? And then this is the one that I loved, really liked, was that as much as we need to talk about these difficult situations and express the concern, also celebrating and acknowledging some of the accomplishments in minority communities and lifting that up. So to the group that I was with, thank you so much for your willingness to really, really go deeper. Thanks.
Thanks, Martina.
I'm happy to share. First, just an apology to my group because I pushed the wrong button about 45 seconds before I needed to, and I exited the group early. So sorry about that, everybody. I thought we had a lovely conversation, and we had the honor of having our speaker in our group, which was an extra delight. Thank you, Hetty. And please feel free to add to what I have to say. So the group valued hearing past stories, hearing about that, how values were in the past that really resonated with people, and that some of these things may need to be taught again, that they were taught in the past, and that especially for Black women, that these ways of being need to be shared and supported. another comment was made that that when white people sometimes listen to stories of Black history, trauma, pain, that because, and this may be because of this sort of European individual centrism, that we immediately relate this to ourselves. You know, we may bring it to shame for what whites have done to people of color, but we're no longer necessarily listening to the story being shared by the Black person or other people of color. We're taking it into our own sphere, and it becomes about us and our pain and our discomfort. And then we are less likely to stay open to hearing the story and making, perhaps, and I'm just saying this now, I'm editing, making some connection there when that possibility exists. You know, we might shut down, so we can't do that. And I thought it really landed for me, you know, and I commented that, you know, I think as white people, we, and others too, but speaking from my own experience as a white person, that, you know, we're not very good at sitting with our own pain. We're not very good at holding pain or holding pain of others, and that perhaps some skill building in that could be of help in being able to really listen and open our hearts and really take in this information and make changes in some more meaningful ways. If somebody wants to add from the second question and I missed the last part, feel free, because I really am sorry I missed those last comments. So that was all I had to say.
Thanks, Barbara. Hannah, were you getting ready to share? Okay.
I can, if you would like. Really what our conversation came down to was the real importance of just making human connection before we try and fix or teach or do anything else, but just getting to know each other on a level that is just because we're at its core human, and we all struggle and we all need support at different times. So creating connection so that you have a safe space to work together for support and know you have a team to lean on, and things like that. And even hearing presentations like today resonated with a lot of our participants, just as a reminder, like I feel, not me, but our participants can feel the same way, and resonated so much with your talk, Hetty, that like it was a good reminder they're just not alone in what they feel sometimes, and that connection alone can be enough to just take another step forward.
Thanks, Hannah. Any other facilitators?
I can jump in. This is Emily. I had the pleasure of being with the small group of various providers across the community. We had some good conversation, and some of the things that stood out that we discussed was around the role that we play in each other's healing. And one of the big things was around listening, which I know is something Ms. Keith talked a lot about in her presentation as well, the importance of that, and also letting those who have experienced trauma, perhaps carrying that generational historical trauma with them, letting them lead the charge and having us figure out from them, from what they tell us, how we can best support. And also being mindful of the way in which we're interacting with others. So our reactions to how people are sharing their story with us can be supportive or could be re-traumatizing, recognizing that people do bring a lot with them, and that could inform the way in which they're interacting with us or the systems in which they interact with. And then taking time to also reflect on our own role in other people's trauma and our role in the past, but even things that we could be doing in the moment that's perpetuating that trauma were all things that we talked about as a small group. And then we talked too a little bit about mental health practices that could better support generational healing of generational trauma, and some of the comments about more inclusion of community in treatment, re-examining the way in which we use the DSM could be one of those. And then again, how are we uplifting the voices of those that we're serving, the importance of that in the healing process. So thanks again to my group for letting me be part of your space.
The biggest highlight from my group is that people were in very different places as far as their knowledge and understanding of much of what Hetty talked about this morning. Some valued this experience as a way to learn, to begin to understand, to hear the personal stories, to hear the history. And others had heard this information and were in a place where they're ready for action. Enough conversation and let's move. But there was space for everyone to speak and to share wherever they were in this process. And I genuinely appreciated that with the group.
Anyone else that wants to add to this before we move on to close out our time together?
I'm trying, but something is happening here.
Here you are, Mary. We hear you.
Okay. So we had a small but lovely group, and really the basis of our conversation was acknowledging that the basic acknowledgement that trauma occurs and needing to speak up about it and the injustice, and an aspect, an element of being aware of the awareness of whether people say it doesn't pertain to us. So that was an interesting comment and conversation. And another comment was an experience as a Black woman, the bias and experience that white blood does go through the veins. And that was something that Hetty had spoken about, and that really resonated with the group and the whole concept. And I really look at where we all come from and what we're all made of. And so then we also talked about a little bit about the second question, and we kind of looked at the second question about mental health practices, bringing people together in treatment. And of course, one of the things that the group spoke about, informal sharing and your ability to feel, and through informal sharing in a group, it provides a format and it provides a format for people to be able to share with other people and have other people's experiences and their experiences validated. And also, two of the folks in my group were, I just spaced out, community health workers, and they had a lot in common. And so just in a little conversation between them, the work that they do and how they work with people was very profound as Hetty's material was presented today. And then the other thing is that I brought up relative to the question, I got involved with the question, was the Pieces in My Own Voice theatrical production as a way of showing mental health through a different type of practice and a visual, non-judgmental way for people of color to see how mental health impacts families and individuals and so on and so forth. So we had a kind of an eclectic little conversation amongst the couple of us, and I think it was a good conversation.
Thanks, Mary.
Can I add something real quick, Sue?
Please.
So we talk about the healing part, and I just, I don't know, I know we don't have the time and space today to talk about this, but I would just say, even in the last year, up until this point now, white people are now seeing a lot of the same thing Black people experience every day in this country. The attitudes of some white people with the Wright House experiences and police abuse and the laws and the practices, the systemic backlashes and the defense or the political aggression shown towards critical race theory, and just the number of things that we are seeing play out in real time. And so when you look at like some of the commentary, like if you're reading some of the commentary to some of the reactions, and you see these individuals who speak in defense of this and in support of that, and then ask yourself, where do these people work at? These are people who exist in a lot of our companies. They exist in a lot of our day-to-day events. And so when, African Americans or Black people come and say, this has been my experience, I've been weaponized, I've been gaslighted, I've been going through all these things, and we see these people play, like you look at the number of people that was at the Capitol. Those people work at places. They take part in a lot of the things that we experience as a people every single day. And so, I know that, all white people are not bad. I know that. But, when you feel racism and when you experience racism and you watch how people don't get involved or they don't say anything or they don't believe you, it just really perpetuates a lot of the ongoing struggles and pain that we continue to experience. So although these forums are awesome and great, the work really has to be done on the level of, like, for instance, if somebody says that some of the things that like pay salaries, right? That's not a systemic thing. That's human doing that. Like if a person gets hired, they're Black and they're getting paid less than the 3 other white people. That's what it is. If a white person says, she's threatening me, and why not ask what happened versus just accusing that woman to be guilty or just whatever. I mean, there's a lot of little things that are big things that happen to people of color that we're not even at the tip of the iceberg. And so I do appreciate another moment today to have this dialogue, but the wound is so deep. It is just so deep. So I do appreciate the effort, but there's so much that has to be hashed out. Like it's just getting worse. Well, I wouldn't even say it's getting worse. It's just it's getting comfortable for some people just to be evil. And so somebody like me who's been through a lot of racial trauma in the last year or two, this it's hard for I have to fight to forgive just so I can keep my sanity, just so that I don't become the angry Black woman portrayed and perpetrated, defamed and libeled, in the situations I've been in. So again, I thank Hetty for her situation. I know there's so many other people out here that's been through, if not as much hurt and pain, and just constant reminders of this country being what it is, from Colin Kaepernick being shunned from football to Wright House looking like a hero. How distorted. How distorted. So that's all I just wanted to add.
Thanks, Terry. We're asking ourselves the next step question, and Allison, I think, can share, one thought we have to keep this or to move this into potential action thinking. So I'm going to turn it over to Alice.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Absolutely. We've spent this whole year looking at the intersection of race and mental health, and we feel that there's been so much information. We don't want it just to stop here. And I think that's what we hear from Terry. We're looking at, we will be hosting a symposium that we will gather people both live virtually as well as in person, so that it can be that there's no hindrance to travel or any other sort of circumstance like that. And we're looking at early April. So we will keep everyone posted on that. We hope to have a date secured soon. It would be a half day. And we really hope we can get into small groups virtually and in person. We'll have some speakers and really continue the discussion that we've had at these 4 coalition meetings this past year. Also to continue with.
And Allison, I'm going to interrupt, sorry.
No.
The focus is going to be on action. Right.
Action. Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the key thing. We've done a lot of talking. So now we want to do some action items. Yes. And then also continuing what we've done this year is that we have been partnering with the Giving Voice to Depression podcast. And there is a new one available with Dr. Maria Amarante talking about healing generational trauma. So that sort of is a nice little add-on to what we heard today. That link will be in an email with many other resources, including the titles of Hetty's books, the CLAW website that of the women's group she oversees. And also we've added now blogs in our on our WISE Wisconsin page. Well, we're trying to change that to End Stigma, but we'll get that link out to you as well. Dr. Anderson has written the first 2 blogs that really have mirrored many of the topics that we have done in these meetings this year. Hetty will be writing one of the blogs as well. And so there'll be much more continuation in the next few months on these topics. There, also want to make sure you know that if you would like to get a certificate of attendance, you can email Carly Gross. That'll be in your email as well. I will discuss again with Hetty if she's comfortable with the recording being shared as well as the PowerPoint. And so as much information as we can get to all of you, we will be doing that. And then I think Hannah's going to share the survey link slide with us so that we really encourage you to take our survey. We really take the comments and really do our planning from the comments and the information we get back. The planning committee looks closely at the survey. And I think that's all I have. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. Unless Sue, you've got anything else, or Hetty? Hetty, thank you very much for your time today, and all of our facilitators as well.
Yes, Allison, I would like to end by saying that those of you who have some African-American women or African women clients, send them our way so that they can have a safe space to talk about their traumas and talk about what's good. We have an awesome Sisters Talk where they can be heard and supported. And you can contact me at HettyKeith51@yahoo.com. My phone number is 414-241-2563. You can contact me by phone or by email, or you can go to our CLAW website, which is clawww.org, and refer them that way. So I appreciate everyone who was here today, and appreciate your comments, and I look forward to talking to you again the next time we have a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.